Hello, and welcome back to Mainly Menswear. My name is Dwayne McLeod, and I am glad that you're here. If you're enjoying the information on this channel, I hope that you will subscribe. And if you know other sewists that might be interested, please let them know that I'm up on YouTube now. Anyway, work progresses on my Lumen Stars shirt. During the last series of videos, I completed a miter vent on the sides, and today I'm in my little studio space working on the cuffs. And I thought that this would be a good time to do a video, not so much on how to make the actual cuff, but ways to attach the cuff that might simplify the process a little bit for you. So let's get started. Okay, before we get started actually attaching a cuff to a shirt, I thought I would back up a little bit and just talk about the pattern piece for your cuff. This is the original pattern piece for my TNT shirt. And there is kind of a lot of useless information here. And my suggestion for anybody who's possibly going to be making more than one shirt is to go ahead and redraft your cuff pattern. So this is a great time to pull out a little scrap of Swedish tracing paper and redo the whole cuff pattern. So this is my redrawn cuff pattern, and I'll tell you what I've done here. This cuff pattern originally has a 5/8 inch seam all the way around, and in the end you're going to be trimming this, and that's just a lot of needless effort in my opinion. So what I would suggest doing is tracing off your cuff pattern and just having a 1/4 inch seam allowance on 3 edges, and keeping the 5/8 inch seam allowance where the cuff is going to actually attach to the sleeve. And this will save you time and effort and aggravation and a lot of needless trimming. I've also just, as a design feature, lopped off the corner of my cuff here, but this could be curved. You can be as creative as you would like to be here. But I would just suggest redrafting your pattern. I also write notes to myself on my pattern pieces. And on my cuff piece, I have noted what the dimensions of the interfacing that I will need are. And that way, I'm not constantly going back to the drawing board trying to figure out how big it is and all of that. It's already on my pattern. I pull out my interfacing, mark it out, cut it out, and away I go. So this is just a little hint that can save you some time and some aggravation when it comes to shirt making. Okay, let's talk about some other changes that you might want to make, or things on your pattern that you can ignore. This is the cuff end of my TNT pattern, and these points here are where 2 pleats would be made, which is pretty standard on a man's dress shirt. And I'm just going to tell you that you can just go ahead and ignore these. Don't waste your time trying to mark these out. There's no need to do it. There's a much easier way. This pattern also has what is called a continuous lap placket, and I can confess that I have only made one once, and it was an absolute beast to make. So my suggestion is that you learn how to make a tower placket on a shirt. And a tower placket is something that I think a lot of shirt makers aspire to, and it's not it's not at all difficult if you have David Coffin's shirt making book. So let's get rid of this for a second. So this is David Coffin's first book, Shirt Making, and he actually gives you the pattern for a tower placket, which is just a godsend. It's on page 72. So you can actually trace this off and replace that continuous lap nightmare with a tower placket. And the instructions for doing it are further on in the book, like on page 103 and 104. And I will confess that I pull this book out every darn time that I make a shirt, because there's a lot of right side to right side. It can get a little bit complicated. So I can't suggest highly enough that if you're serious about making shirts and you want your shirts to be as professional as you can make them, that you should go out and at least buy this one book by David Coffin. There's more information in here than I can possibly ever absorb, but I refer to it almost every single time that I make a shirt. Another shirt making hint that I'm going to pass along today is actually inside my cuff, and that is the interfacing. I am a huge fan of the fusible woven interfacings from a company called Fashion Sewing Supply, and they make two weights of interfacing for shirts. One is called Shirt Crisp, which is a little bit heavier, and the other one is called Light Crisp. And because I'm working with a fairly light fabric today, I'm using the Light Crisp version. But I just want to say that these are professional grade interfacings, and I can't recommend them highly enough. Please consider purchasing from them. I would get some of both, and just forget the stuff that you're going to find at the sort of big box craft fabric store, because it will bring you nothing but disappointment. And this can just really elevate the quality of your shirt making. Okay, remember that I told you that you could skip the marking of the pleats on your sleeve. And here I'm going to show you how easy this is to do. This is actually a technique that I learned from Peter Lappin over at Male Pattern Boldness. He had the opportunity to take some courses in shirt making at FIT, if we were also lucky, right? Anyway, but he passed along this hint, and it is so simple. So starting at your placket, you just need 2 pins, and you place them at the 1 and 2 inch marks away from your placket. So we'll put one here at 1 inch and this one at 2. Now it's just a matter of bringing these 2 pins together towards the placket to form the pleat, the first pleat. So we bring those together, and I usually just pin it together like that. And we're halfway there. Okay, now we're actually going to pin the cuff onto the shirt. And this is going to be the inside of the cuff is going to get pinned to the wrong side of your shirt. And I always like to let the cuff hang out just a little bit past the edge of my tower placket, because in the end the cuff is going to get flipped back up, and all of this material is going to get tucked down inside of the cuff. So I am just going to start pinning this together. And at this point, I'm going to flip it over, because this is how it's going to get sewn. And you only need to pin up to just a little bit past that pleat that you've already made here. So let's pin that into position. There we go. And now you want to take your cuff and go to the other end of your placket. And again, let your cuff run out just a little bit past the placket. And we're going to pin back towards the other side. So you will continue to pin along over towards the pleat that you first made. And as you do this, you will see that there's going to be some excess shirt fabric. And you will need to just kind of manipulate this to create another pleat that is going to end a 1/2 inch away from your first pleat. And you might just kind of have to like fiddle with this and tease with it, but you will eventually get it. And once everything is pinned, I'll take it to the machine and we will actually attach the cuff to the sleeve. Okay, now it's time to actually sew the cuff onto the shirt. And this is a little bit hard to show, but I actually start my line of stitching in about 3/8 of an inch from the edge of the cuff. I have found that if I start right at the edge and sew, that when I go to flip the cuff, I can almost always see that line of stitching right at the edge of the cuff, and it just drives me crazy. So I have found that if I start in a bit and also end short of the cuff, that stitching is much less visible. So I'm going to go ahead and just stitch this at 5/8, and you have to keep the outside cuff up, right, out of your way. And I take the pins out as I go along. And they just kind of very slowly go along. In the next step, we'll trim, turn it, and move on to the next step. Now that the cuff is attached to the sleeve, I like to go ahead and trim out the excess fabric on the inner cuff. And my preferred tool for trimming are these little bandage shears that medical people, nurses use to take bandages off people. But their advantage is that the way they're designed, there's no way that you're going to clip any unnecessary fabric or accidental fabric underneath. So I'm just going to go ahead and clip this seam, and then we'll be back to do some basting. If you follow my blog or if you follow me on Instagram, you know that I baste a lot. And I consider myself to be like a basteaholic. Anyway, this is my preferred basting thread. This is an Italian cotton basting thread. I'll list a source for it below. But a roll of this will last a long time. A long time. So just kind of reel yourself off at generous length and thread up a needle. And what I do is I fold the cuff back, and you may need like a turner just to tuck this in here. But I'm really happy because I can't see any stitching here, which has always been a source of frustration for me. Anyway, you want to bring your outer cuff up and just cover over that line of stitching and baste this in place. And if you have a sleeve board, it makes this so much easier. And you're going to want to start with just a little back stitch to secure it. And then just work your way along, basting this upper cuff on. The advantage of doing this is that you're not going to get stuck with all those pins. I hate getting stuck with pins, and this is just such a more controlled way to do it. And look, here are our two pleats, beautifully formed, and we didn't have to mark anything. It doesn't get any easier than that. So what will happen here is I'm going to baste this cuff up and take it back to the machine, and I'm going to edge stitch along here, and the cuff is essentially going to be finished. All that will be left to do is some top stitching and a buttonhole and a button. So I'll come back and I'll just show you the finished cuff. Okay, I finished my cuff. I've edge stitched along the top here, and I'm just really pleased with how this has turned out. This cuff has kind of a fun contrast on the inside. It also has a strap that's been sewn into the sleeve with a button hole that eventually will kind of button back up onto the sleeve and will hold the cuffs in place when they're rolled up. I think that'll be a fun look. Here are our pleats, beautifully formed, and we didn't have to mark anything. And the inside is all cleanly finished off with our French seam. So in closing, I just want to say that in sewing, there are many ways to do things. And I know that there are other ways to put a cuff on a shirt. This is just a method that works for me. And you may want to give it a try. It might work for you. You may have other method that gives you a better result. You just have to do what works for you. This is going to be the last shirt making video for a while. I'm going to switch over and do some little tailoring videos here soon. Anyway, it's been fun to do these. I hope they've been helpful for you. I know that there are lots of shirt makers out there, and I have always said that if you can make a shirt, you can make anything, and I still believe that that is true. So in closing, I just wish you all happy sewing. Please come back and see what happens next, I guess. This YouTube thing is all very new to me. It's been fun, it's been challenging, and I just hope that you all find it helpful. Okay, bye-bye for now.